Hi, this is Mark Carrington from GoForForexProfits.com. This is the next in my series of videos called What's Going On in Financial Markets. And in this particular one, I'm going to ask the question about what's going on with the South African Rand. Now, the story is based on a trade that I did 8 days ago. The trade was triggered by a post that a friend made about the possibility of a new Minister of Finance in South Africa. And I reckon that given the track record of the last short-term Minister of Finance, that the South African Rand was going to collapse. So I actually made a trade. So there's the post that went up. Here's the analysis I did on the currency. And basically we've seen currency been running down with a series of lower highs and has consistently stopped at this level 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times. So my view is the currency was going to do one of two things. It was going to break down, a retest and drop, or it was going to head upwards. Now this is against the background of US dollar strength. The US dollar, basically what it does is it follows interest rates. So as US dollars are rising in the United States, the US dollar should rise. So let's just have a look at interest rates. On this chart here I have 3-month euro dollar rate, so that's a short-term rate. It's a December 2020, so it's looking some period out in time. This is currently a daily chart, and this is a chart of the price of the future. So if the price is falling, it means that interest rates are rising. So if we're going to step across and make it a 3-month chart, we might have to make it a 6-month chart. You can see on a 6-month chart we can see that the main trajectory is downwards, and then the price has leveled out. So we see where the crosshairs of the cursor are now. We have a high there, and then the last high was a lower high, so that's on the 8th of February. So we're certainly seeing interest rates rising. So when interest rates are rising, the US dollar is strengthening, which means that every other currency should be weakening. So if I go back to this chart here, if the theory of the case holds, is that this is US dollar, as it says there, US dollar against the South African Rand. So when this chart is rising, is the US dollar is strengthening. So we certainly have enough reasons from an inflation point of view to explain that this is going upwards. Well, let's go and have a look and just show that actually works in reality. So here we have a whole series of currencies, and I'll just step through a couple. Euro against the US dollar, and we can see over, so from the 2nd of February the euro has been falling, which means the US dollar has been strengthening. From the 1st of February, 2nd of February, we can see the pound has fallen against the US dollar, so the US dollar is strengthening. This chart is the next one, is the US dollar against the yen. We have to read this the other way around. So then we'll see from the 6th of February, so a little bit later, the US dollar started strengthening against the yen. And we'll see on the Swiss franc exactly the same. On the 31st, it was the low, so on the 1st of February, so pretty much the same. All the currency pairs have been showing that the US dollar is stronger. And yet the South African Rand, so here we've got the US dollar on from the 8th of February, and even then we go back to the 31st of January, the US dollar has been progressively weaker, getting weaker against the South African Rand. And you can see that it has broken through that horizontal line that I showed you on the previous chart. So the South African Rand has strengthened appreciably. The next thing I want to do is I'm just going to measure how big this move is. This move on the last day, if I can get it to work. It's gone up. The number on the right hand side there is 264. So 264 pips, or 2%, 264. So let's just remember that number. I'm going to just type it in here. 264 ZAR. So we're just going to remember that one. And then we're going to have a look at the Australian dollar. And we can see in this time frame, the same time frame, the Australian dollar is actually against the US dollar has gone progressively sideways. So on the 2nd of February, basically exactly the same level as it was. So at least the US dollar has not been strengthening against the Australian dollar, but the Australian dollar has not strengthened. I'm going to do that same measurement just to have a look here and to see how big this move is from top to bottom there. And there, so it's 1%, so it is 77 pips, 77. So I'm going to put the, so we do 77 AUD. And that's all I really need to do for now, because this is starting to, South African Rand has moved 264 pips, and the Aussie dollar has moved only 77. And the last one I'm going to have a look at is I'm going to have a look at silver, because I had a trade open on silver. And we can see that what silver has done from that period of time is it has gone up. So there's the 31st, it's gone up right up to these levels here. So it's gone from $1665 to $18. So that is silver strengthening against the US dollar. So what that's telling me, so what's going on is there is a divergence happening in the markets. There's a divergence between those currencies that are being driven by interest rate differentials, which is making the US dollar stronger, and those currencies, or those commodities, silver is a commodity, which are driven by commodity prices. So as the commodity prices are rising, the currencies are not weakening against the US dollar, or not weakening to the same extent. And I'm going to do two things. I want to dig a little bit further in, but I'm going to show one more chart, which is just to talk about commodity prices. And it's a chart I look at every day. And this is it's, as you can see, as Power Shares DB Base Metals Fund. So it's an exchange traded fund that tracks base metal prices. And we can see that base metal prices have been driving upwards. So we saw the chart before was a silver price going up stronger, and here we're seeing base metal prices going stronger. So that will explain why the South African Rand has strengthened against the US dollar. So what's going on is it's a commodity-based economy, whether it's gold, whether it's base metals, or whether it's agriculture. We'll see, if we step across to agriculture, we'll see that agriculture in that short period of time has gone up a little bit, but not a lot. So that will explain part of the difference. But I was just sort of somewhat surprised by this difference between the move on the South African Rand and against the Australian dollar. Because if they were being driven by the same things, I would have expected the Australian dollar to have broken through this resistance line. It's a very similar looking resistance line. I would have expected to see it broken through like that South African Rand did. So there's something else going on which is worth exploring. So I reached across to my good friend Google, and I just typed in ZAR Finance, and I'm looking for news, and we're highlighting news. I'm looking for news as to what might be going on. And there are two articles that caught my eye. The first one here says Rand eyes the 13 Rand per dollar mark. It's from East Coast Radio 13 hours ago. And the other one that caught my eye was tax hikes likely as South Africa tries to plug the deficit, and that's 14 hours ago. These other articles were specific to stock market activity. So if we go to the Rand eyes, the 13 Rand mark, and basically it talks about what the charts are going to do, and it says, in the absence of big political and economic news, the Rand's run the last week is driven largely by improved emerging market sentiment. Well, I would say it's driven largely by improved commodity prices, but recent data supports the emerging market sentiment. They don't talk about commodities at all, but basically it says there is no other news in the market other than the risk of an internal issue is still prevalent for the rand. Most notice a possible cabinet reshuffle. Well, that would mean that we'd expect the rand to be getting worse, not stronger. So let's step across to the other article. The other article, it's in the International Tax Review. It's dated the 14th of February, so it's really current. Tax hikes likely as South Africa tries to plug the deficit. Finance Minister is set to announce higher tax rates as well as other measures in his upcoming budgets. So the minister's Pravin Gordhan, and there's talk that he'll be replaced. He needs to find tax and spending measures, and the tax options available ahead of the budget appear to be limited on February the 22nd. And that is the other part of the clue for me. That's what's going on, is the information that's in the budget on the 22nd. My hypothesis is that has been leaked to the markets, and that will explain why we are seeing the rand move 264 points compared to the Aussie dollar moving only 77 points. And we've seen that the Aussie dollar has not broken out, or rather we've seen, but pull up the rand chart again, we've seen the rand break this horizontal level and drop below here. I suspect there is some news in the budget which is good for the South African rand, or the world's view of the South African economy. So there our thoughts are on what's going on the South African rand.